Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, reviewing all the national champions, 2018, going all the way back through history, and basically looking at what determined who played in national championship games or who was voted number one as we go through three basic systems of the playoffs, 2014 through the present. And then the BCS era, of course, which two teams were determined number one and number two based on a computer and a human vote. That going from 1998 through 2013. And then prior to 1998, we had the human vote following the bowl games in which there were conference affiliations and attachments to certain destinations that didn't necessarily provide the best matchups. But then there was a human vote after all the games were played to determine the national championship. Going back to 1936, the poll era of the AP and the UPI, which was taken over then by the coaches poll from USA Today and then later ESPN. All right, we had some confusion concerning 2017. Not necessarily wrong or inaccurate information, but I didn't explain some things rather well. I do understand and I do know where teams played games and what the records were for those particular teams. So let me clarify 2017. But first, encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. If you like this channel, regardless of whether you agree with me or not, but you think it's quality college football analysis, discussion, and debate, which that's our goal, then please do that. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to keep the channel going. I work on this 40 to 50 hours a week in addition to another job and so forth. So if you want to keep the channel going, then we need support and we need to keep this thing moving along. I would like to do it full-time all the time and do it the right way in terms of better equipment, better surroundings and so forth, and to be able to focus more on the instant analysis of news, coaching, hires, firings, all those things that we need to do here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. But we are still definitely the voice of college football. All right, here we go. 2017, Alabama won the national championship. Of course, that was fair and square once they reached the playoff. That's key right there. They definitely earned it once they reached the playoff. They beat the number one team in the country, Clemson, 24-6. They beat Georgia in comeback fashion in the national championship game in overtime. But getting to that situation, there is certainly tons of controversy, and their national championship overall can be questioned. Alabama finished 11-1. They lost by 2 scores to Auburn. Therefore, they did not earn a right to go to Atlanta and the SEC championship game. Auburn did. They had the head-to-head win, and they also, of course, had the same conference record. Therefore, they went to Atlanta, and then Auburn lost to Georgia. Okay. This left out 2 conference champions, Ohio State and USC. Ohio State gets all the focus because they had a better resume than USC. USC, both teams had 11-2 following conference championship wins. USC defeated Stanford. Ohio State defeated Wisconsin, who was undefeated and in line to get to the college football playoff at 13-0, but the Buckeyes won that game over Wisconsin 27-21. So we had the controversy. Alabama versus Ohio State, USC, and we'll get to UCF in just a second. So we had 2 conference champions out there. Well, USC, based on playing in a weak Pac-12, that certainly showed itself in the bowl season going 1-8, but also losing its most significant game to Notre Dame, 49-14, and its best wins coming in against Stanford. That was the issue with USC, certainly in 2017, so they weren't really considered despite the name brand and despite the conference championship. Ohio State and Alabama is the great comparison, of course, because on Alabama's side, much like Ohio State the year before in being a non-conference champion that was selected above Penn State in its own conference, Alabama had the better record than Ohio State, 11-1 versus 11-2. So Alabama had that on its side. Alabama also had a loss against a top 10 Auburn team by 2 scores on the road on the Plains. That was a better loss than Ohio State's 2 losses, losing to Oklahoma by 2 scores at home and losing to Iowa, getting blasted on the road. So Ohio State had the worst record at 11-2 versus 11-1. They also had the worst losses. All right, on Ohio State's side, factoring in the wins as much as the losses, they had better wins. Alabama beat 2 fringe top 15 teams in LSU and Mississippi State. They needed the last minute of play to pull off the win in Starkville against Mississippi State. Ohio State had much more impressive wins against the likes of Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State. And to balance out the Iowa loss, Ohio State blasted Michigan State, a team that finished in the top 15 in the country at 10-3. The Buckeyes won that game 48-3. Alabama did not have that win on its resume. And Ohio State, of course, won over Wisconsin to win the Big Ten championship. So we got conference champion with better wins. We've got a team that sat home and did not even make the conference championship game with a better record and not as bad of a loss. All right, so that was the debate, and of course the selection committee picked Alabama. The other issue in here is, of course, Central Florida. Central Florida went 13-0. Of course, they do not play the schedule or the level of play that the other teams in question do, but they did go undefeated, and then, of course, after the fact, beat Auburn, which I think is poetic justice. I think it's amazing that it all fell into place this way. Not only did Central Florida complete an undefeated season, they beat a team in Auburn that's not only from the SEC, which they were unable to do this year against LSU, but they beat Auburn, a team from the SEC, a team in Auburn that beat the two teams that played the national championship game, Alabama and Georgia, and a team that played those games, the Central Florida game over Auburn in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, and then also the national championship game was played on the same field in Atlanta a week later. Just irony, coincidence, poetic justice, whatever you want to call it. So this is what we're doing here. If you have yet to catch the other videos, this is what we're doing. We're reviewing the championship and saying, is the championship valid? Well, yes, Alabama earned that championship in the playoff. Definitely. That can't be disputed on the field against Clemson and Georgia. Did they deserve to be there in the playoff? Well, if your criteria is a judgment call by the committee to say best team, absolutely. They did have the lack of that horrible loss that Ohio State had, and they also had the better record, although, of course, they were saved from playing a conference championship game, and then after they played the national title game against Georgia, we could see that Alabama would have definitely been risking another loss playing in the SEC championship game. So the SEC championship game, ironically, or the Auburn-Alabama game, the Iron Bowl, one of the games that we consider to be the most important in college football each year, actually turned out to be meaningless. Actually, it turned out to be contradictory because it took Auburn and put them in a place where they risked losing again, and of course they did, which knocked them out of the national championship playoff. And for Alabama, it preserved them, much like Notre Dame this year. It preserved them, but by not exposing them to having to play one of the best teams in the country in a conference championship game. So Alabama was protected and then selected by the committee. So they earned the championship in the playoff. I would dispute their championship overall because they did not win a conference. And I want conference champions to be rewarded. Track record, resume versus deserving or versus best team. I don't even know what the best teams are. What I say the best teams are versus what you say the best teams are two different things. So we will also definitely allow Central Florida to claim a national championship. This is not an exact process that I'm going through. This has its own flaws and so forth, but we are giving clarity and context to the national championship races each year. So Central Florida, they did all they could do. What more could they do? They not only won their conference and went 13-0, they then defeated the team that defeated the two teams that played in the national championship game on the same surface. They didn't go and play Iowa State in a bowl game like a typical group of five champion does, and go play an 8-4, 7-5 team in the Power 5 and win that game. They beat an Auburn team that played for the SEC championship game. And also keep in mind, those people out there, and this is on a side note, who say two lost teams should not be allowed to make the college football playoff, that there's some magical difference between one loss and two loss, although there's not a magical line between 0 losses and 1 loss, but for some reason there is between 1 loss and 2 losses. the Auburn Tigers had 2 losses when they played in the SEC championship game. And of course, they were in the top 4 at that time, even before a win against Georgia. They would have gone to the playoff with 2 losses. So this is the final conclusion, that Alabama won the national championship in the playoff. They earned it there, but we can dispute whether they earned a right to the playoff. We are also going to allow UCF, because of all they accomplished, to claim a national championship. Their parade, their banner, their claim, I think it's all legitimate. What else could they do? And then a rightful opportunity could have gone to, especially Ohio State, because of the track record and resume and conference championship in arguably the best conference, maybe the second best, one of the top conferences in America, and we'll give USC, based on conference championship, in the same record as Ohio State, although that was kind of settled on the field in the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State 24 and USC 7. So there it is. Alabama wins the championship. UCF has a claim to the national championship, and we are also keeping track, especially during the BCS era and the playoff era, and we will do so in the bowl season. That's going to be very messy pre-1998, where teams were not afforded the opportunity. So Ohio State was not afforded the opportunity to play for a championship like Alabama and other conference champions. That's the rundown for 2017. Hopefully that clarified things for you, as we will march on 1 video per day. And if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it, there's a number of ways to do it, we will get into in the future, because this has to keep going. We would like to keep the discussion going and keep this channel soaring. Thank you for all the progress and advancement we've made in recent days. Has been tremendous. But just if you do any Amazon shopping, and I hear that Amazon's pretty popular, that there are people out there that actually use Amazon, click the link on any of the videos that you find in the description section of any of the videos. Click the link right there. Use that link to enter Amazon. Do your regular shopping. You don't need to buy that college football product that I've got displayed there. I just had to do that. You don't have to buy the product. Just do your regular shopping, and you help support Mark Rogers TV. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. 2016 is coming. Our review of Clemson's national championship right here at the college football mecca right here. This is what we do all the time. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.